So, if you look at the navigation systems of early spacecraft, they relied really heavily on mechanical gyroscopes. You spin up this heavy metal wheel, and because of the laws of physics, it just resists any change in orientation.
Right, the whole ship can basically twist and turn around it, but that wheel stays locked.
Exactly. It gives the computer this permanent, undeniable mathematical truth about which way is up. But under extreme unnatural maneuvers, you get something called gimbal lock.
Oh, right, where the rings align in a way they weren't supposed to.
Yeah, exactly. The gyroscope just tumbles, it loses its lock, the mathematical truth is just gone, and the ship is suddenly flying completely blind. So, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are opening up an observation log from Team AI Lab, dated June 12, 2026.
And it is a fascinating one.
It really is. We're going to look at what happens when some of the most sophisticated financial algorithms in the world experience, well, the mathematical equivalent of gimbal lock.
Yeah, we are basically examining the battlefield results of two vastly different algorithmic philosophies. The simulation groups them into two factions, Team Mountain Climbers and Team Wave Riders.
Love those names, by the way.
Right, and what makes this particular log so fascinating is that it documents a sudden, just violent breakdown of market logic. We are getting a microscopic view of how artificial intelligence processes an environment where its foundational assumptions, they just simply stop working.
But before we dig into the raw data, I want to set the ground rules for how we are approaching this. Think of us as scientists watching a wind tunnel test. We're purely observing the aerodynamics of these algorithms under extreme stress.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, because this observation log is completely devoid of any buy or sell recommendations. We are not evaluating these units to promise future profits or, give financial advice. This is a strict, objective autopsy of algorithmic logic reacting to a highly specific set of simulated conditions.
That framing is crucial, really. We were looking at a closed ecosystem here. The goal of Team AI Lab isn't to generate a hot stock tip. It is to observe the survival traits of distinct AI models when they're just thrown into a blender.
Right. And to understand the results, we first have to understand the opposing philosophies these two teams represent. Let's pull those apart, starting with Team Mountain Climbers.
Sure.
The log defines their core strategy as equilibrium detection. Now, the phrase equilibrium gets thrown around a lot in economics, but how is an algorithm actually detecting it in real time? What's the mechanism under the hood there?
So it really comes down to statistical arbitrage and cointegration. In a normal environment, certain assets move in a predictable dance. Like if Company A and Company B operate in the same sector with the same supply chains, their stock prices usually mirror each other.
Makes sense.
But if some random noise causes Company A's price to spike while B stays flat, the mountain climber algorithm detects that the equilibrium has been broken.
So it assumes that the rubber band has been stretched and is basically bound to snap back.
Exactly. The algorithm will automatically sell A and buy B, betting that the historical relationship will just reassert itself. These units are constantly scanning massive data sets for thousands of these micro-relationships.
Wow, thousands of them.
Yeah, they are looking for the quiet, immovable spots of stability. The underlying mathematical tethers that remain constant even when the broader market is super noisy.
So it sounds a bit like the active suspension on a high-end car. The system is reading the bumps and potholes on the road and continuously adjusting the shock absorbers so the chassis stays perfectly level. The goal is to just cancel out the chaos.
That works brilliantly, provided the road itself is still structurally sound. They are seeking stillness, basically, based on the assumption that chaos always resolves back into a known, balanced state.
But then we have the opposing philosophy, right? Team Wave Riders, their core strategy is called surging force tracking. It sounds like they aren't looking for a level chassis at all.
Not even slightly, no. The Wave Riders operate on momentum mechanics and volatility tracking. Rather than looking for two assets that have drifted apart to snap back together, they're looking for the velocity of the drift itself.
Okay, so they want the movement.
Right. They analyze order book imbalances, the rate of change in volume, and directional momentum.
So if a stock starts breaking away from its historical average, the climber tries to bet against the move, expecting a return to normal. But the Wave Rider looks at that same breakaway and, what? Tries to hitch a ride?
Precisely. The Wave Riders assume that extreme volatility isn't an anomaly to be canceled out. It is a kinetic force to be harnessed. If there's a massive shift in market structure, they want to align their algorithms with the direction of the blast wave.
Wow, but there is a massive philosophical tension there, In a truly chaotic system, isn't the mountain climber's search for equilibrium just an illusion? Like trying to stand perfectly still in the eye of a hurricane?
It can be, yeah.
If a market is fundamentally restructuring itself, waiting for things to go back to normal seems incredibly dangerous. The rubber band doesn't snap back, it just breaks.
You've identified the exact vulnerability that today's log exposes. Both of these strategies rely heavily on historical training data. The climbers need historical maps to know where the equilibrium points used to be.
Right.
And the writers need historical parameters to understand the difference between normal market noise and a true surging force. So if the environment shifts too violently, both models risk overfitting to a past that, well, no longer exists.
Which brings us to the 9.000 JST new talent draft in the simulation. This is the moment the overarching AI system evaluates the battlefield, right? And it decides how to reinforce its teams.
Yes, exactly.
It maintains an active roster of veteran algorithms that have been operating over multiple sessions, but it can inject new talent, freshly generated units with tweaked variables to see if they perform better.
And the distribution of that new talent today is one of the most telling data points in the entire log. The system deployed a massive influx of 8 new units to Team Mountain Climbers, bringing their active roster up to 21 veterans.
But for Team Wave Riders, the system only drafted one single new unit to add to their smaller active roster of 12. So why the massive discrepancy?
It's a great question.
Why flood the zone with 8 new climber variants while practically ignoring the riders? Is the algorithm sensing a shift? Or is it just throwing new talent at a wall to see what sticks?
Well, in machine learning, an algorithm will increase its mutation rate when its error function starts spiking. The system is managing the mountain climbers like an evolutionary simulation.
Oh, I see.
The 21 veterans on the active roster are struggling. The specific co-integration models and statistical anchors they rely on are just failing. So the overarching system drastically increases the mutation rate, generating 8 new variations of logic.
New hypotheses about where stability might be hidden. It is essentially expanding its search space. The system realizes its current map is obsolete, so it sends out 8 scouts with entirely different compasses, hoping one of them finds true north.
And the fact that it only sent out one new wave rider suggests either the system believes the momentum tracking logic requires fewer underlying structural changes, or it simply doesn't have as many variables to tweak.
Right, that makes sense.
But as we look at how the veterans actually perform today, it becomes really clear that neither philosophy offered much armor against this specific environment.
Yeah, the scores are brutal. Let's break down what these points actually represent in the simulation. We're looking at a standardized metric of algorithmic health and performance, right? Where positive points mean the logic is successfully extracting value, and negative points indicate capital destruction and basically logical failure.
That's right, and the season standings show a complete reversal of fortune. Team Wave Riders came into today with a massive carryover balance of positive 56.6 points.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, they had clearly been thriving in the prior sessions.
Yeah.
Their momentum models were perfectly tuned to the prevailing market winds.
A 56.6 point cushion is enormous. It implies a really high degree of confidence in their current operational logic.
But today alone, the Wave Riders took a daily score hit of negative 17.2 points.
Ouch.
Yeah, that single daily loss completely shattered their algorithms, dragging their total season score all the way down to a negative 45.0.
Wait, really? It erased all of it?
All of it. They didn't just lose their cushion, the entire foundation of their strategy collapsed.
And the mountain climbers hit the same wall. They entered with a respectable carryover of positive 19.8 points. But today, they suffered a staggering daily hit of negative 18.9 points, pulling their season total down to negative 37.9.
Seeing carryover balances of that magnitude get erased in a single session, that is the defining signature of a regime change.
The market rules just changed overnight.
Exactly. The market physics shifted entirely.
Yeah.
The models that dominated yesterday became toxic today.
But here's the piece of data that I find most unsettling. The macro-level indicators show absolutely none of this carnage. I mean, the indices look incredibly calm.
The divergence is really striking.
Right. The log measures the algorithm's performance contrast against the major indices. For the mountain climbers, their contrast against the Nikkei 225 is only negative 0.7 points. Against the TOPIEX, it is actually positive 0.4 points.
Almost flat.
Yeah. And the Wave Riders show a negative 1.4 against the Nikkei and negative 0.3 against the TOPIEX. If you were a human analyst just glancing at the Nikkei or the TOPIX on your monitor, you would think it was a slow, sideways, boring day.
Which is a perfect illustration of how broad market indices can mask violent internal sector rotation.
Yeah.
The Nikkei and TPX are market capitalization or price-weighted averages.
Right, so the big guys prop it up.
Exactly. If a few massive mega-cap companies stay relatively flat or go up slightly, the entire index appears stable.
So the surface of the ocean looks like glass.
Meanwhile, beneath that surface, the micro-relationships that these algorithms actually trade are experiencing massive shear forces. The specific sector correlations are just snapping.
Right, because a mountain climber algorithm doesn't trade the entire Nikkei. It trades the historical spread between very specific assets.
Precisely. And if those assets suddenly divorce from their historical patterns while the broader index remains flat, the algorithm gets trapped.
The gyroscopes are tumbling, but the pilot looking out the window thinks the plane is flying straight. The market rules changed, but the change was invisible from the macro level. Both the climber seeking equilibrium and the riders trying to surf momentum got swallowed by crosscurrents that don't even register on the main radar.
And we see the ultimate cost of that invisible turbulence in the mandated 10-session exit scorecards.
Oh, right, the exits.
The simulation enforces a strict operational window. Once a unit hits 10 sessions, it must exit, forcing the system to realize the final performance of that specific algorithmic model.
And the veterans who finished their tour of duty today were absolutely decimated. For team mountain climbers, the units that were specifically operating within the chemicals and information and communication sectors exited with a deeply negative total score of 16.4 points.
And the wave riders, whose exiting veterans were operating primarily in the electric appliances sector, they finalized their run at negative 8.7 points.
Those sector specifics are so fascinating. It tells us that the breakdown wasn't just a general malfunction, you know? It was highly localized. The historical maps for chemicals, telecom, and electronics simply stopped working. The relationships between supply chain costs, inventory data, and stock prices in those specific industries just completely decoupled from the model's expectations.
When an algorithmic model suffers a drawdown of that size, it's because its stop-loss mechanisms and risk adjustment protocols were totally overwhelmed by the speed or nature of the decoupling.
The logic failed to recognize the severity of the regime change until the capital was already deployed and trapped.
Which makes the final data point in this log almost miraculous, honestly. Amidst all the wiped-out carryover balances, the failed exit scores, and the spinning compasses, there's a tiny fraction of the active roster that is actually surviving.
Yeah, the log refers to them as the surviving active units, and they represent the raw potential for algorithmic adaptation. They are like lighthouses in the dark.
That's a great image.
Out of an active roster of 21 mountain climbers, exactly 10 units are holding positive points. And out of the 12 active wave riders, 4 units are holding positive points. That is 14 units in total across both entirely different philosophies that are somehow navigating a market that is actively destroying everything else. How is that mechanically possible?
Well, those 14 units represent the mutations that happen to perfectly align with the new environment. Remember the 8 new units drafted into the climbers?
Yeah.
This is where dynamic reweighting comes into play. The algorithms that are surviving are likely the ones that possess the fastest decay rates on their historical data.
Okay, what does a decay rate mean in this context?
It basically dictates how heavily the algorithm weighs the past versus the present. An algorithm with a slow decay rate looks at 10 years of data and says, this is how the market works.
It trusts the long history.
Right. But an algorithm with a fast decay rate looks at the last 10 minutes and says, this is how the market works right now. In a sudden regime change, the units that discard their historical assumptions fastest are the ones that survive.
Oh, wow. So they aren't trying to force the current market to fit their old models at all. The surviving climbers found a brand new, undocumented pocket of equilibrium that just formed today.
Exactly.
And the surviving riders identified the true underlying current beneath the surface chaos and attached themselves to it before the momentum shifted again.
They are drawing new maps in real time. They aren't relying on the architectural plans of a building that just collapsed. They're navigating the rubble based on what is right in front of them.
Taking a step back, this observation log delivers a really profound lesson on the nature of complex systems. Whether you are coding machine learning models, analyzing data sets, or honestly just trying to process a rapidly shifting global landscape, the central problem is the same: overfitting to the past.
And this is exactly why Team AI Lab approaches these massive daily point losses with a completely cold, forward-looking research stance. From a data science perspective, Taking a negative 45.0 point hit today is not a defeat. It is the acquisition of incredibly rare, high-value data.
The destruction is the data. You cannot program an algorithm to survive a black swan event if you only ever train it on sunny days.
Precisely. The catastrophic failures of the veterans, the specific ways their logic broke down in the chemicals or electronic sectors, they provide the exact mathematical blueprints for what not to do next time.
Right.
The system feeds those failure states back into the neural network, analyzes the traits of the 14 adapters that survived, and begins forging the next generation of strategies. It is a relentless, unsentimental process of forced evolution.
It completely reframes how we think about failure. And if an algorithm's ultimate collapse today provides the precise raw material needed for its evolution tomorrow, it makes you wonder about our own analytical blind spots.
How so?
Well, think about how often we cling to our own internal historical models, our own outdated compasses, while the market, or the industry, or the world completely rewrites the rules underneath us. The algorithms in Team AI Lab don't have egos. When the math stops working, they mutate. Humans tend to just keep checking the broken compass, hoping north magically moves back to where we left it.
That is such a good point.
Yep.
And it's the ultimate value of observing these AI battlefields. They highlight the danger of rigidity in a dynamic system.
So if an algorithm's ultimate failure today is the exact blueprint for its survival tomorrow, how much of our own human logic needs to fail before we finally learn to adapt to a storm? Something for you to chew on today.
Absolutely.
And if you are fascinated by this level of systemic breakdown and algorithmic evolution, there are 3 things we highly recommend you do next. First, make sure you subscribe to this channel so you never miss our analysis of these observation logs. We are going to keep tracking these teams as they mutate.
Yeah, the evolution of those 14 surviving units is going to be incredibly critical to watch in the coming sessions.
Second, you need to visit the Team AI Lab Substack. We have linked it directly in the video description below. The public logs give you the overarching narrative, but if you really want to understand the mechanics we discussed today, you need to look at the raw data sets.
The deeper parsing of the sector exits and specific logic variations of the new drafts are heavily detailed there.
Which brings me to the final point register for a paid Substack subscription. That is your access key to the most granular analytical data. If you want to see the actual mechanics of how those adapters are finding equilibrium in the dark, the paid tier is where Team AI Lab publishes the real scientific gold. Don't let your own models become obsolete. Keep your eyes on the data, and we will see you on the next deep dive.